Very official.
Yes.
Well, welcome, Stephanie Stanley.
Thank you, Barb. It's lovely to finally be tasting together with you.
Yes, and I think that it is, in fact, my total pleasure because I have you all to myself. So I'm going to record this and hopefully share it so others can benefit from the story that you're going to be sharing and the wines that we're going to be tasting. So I will let you take it away.
All right. Well, really, thank you very much for the opportunity to tell the Peak Cellars story and to really let people know who we are and how we started and what we're all about. So I'll try not to blather on too long, but just to give you a sense of how we began is our owner, Dennis O'Rourke, basically in the late 2008 after the recession, he's always had an interest in property development and real estate and things like that. He's a property developer, sort of does the civil site prep and based out of Edmonton. So he started buying up properties along Carr's Landing Road because he's lived in the Lake Country area since 1973, sort of on and off. And he started buying up properties and accumulating 5 acres, 10 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres, little bits everywhere, and ended up accumulating 300 acres along Carr's Landing Road with a few homes, and some of it had been cultivated orchard in the past, but a lot of it was also completely untouched, uncultivated land, pine trees, and just totally untouched. So there had to be a lot of site prep, deep X ripping to sort of open up the land and allow the roots to sort of find different ways and not just the rows the way they're planted. And a lot of thought went into planting, what varieties went into which soil profiles, how the clones were planted, mixes of clones of Pinot and different things, where the Chardonnay, the Pinot Noir, the Riesling, where all these varieties were placed on the land. Because our property is there's about 100 acres planted along Carr's Landing Road. And about the bottom third of it is roughly, bottom third is sort of more heavy clay. That whole area is a lot more glacial rock, a lot of boulders and a lot of clay, because when the ancient Lake Penticton drained out, all the sand and all the fluffies went south and all the heavy stuff stayed up north. Okay. So the property, the area closer to the road and the lake now is a little more heavier clay. And then in our our middle and upper elevations is where we have a lot more of that broken granite, glacial till, like a lot more broken rock and things like that. So 100 acres got planted along Carr's Landing Road, and just about 4.5 acres were planted at Goldie Road, where the current site of the Peak Cellars winery is.
You said Goldie Road?
Goldie Road. So that's the road, so just off of Okanagan Center Road, it's Goldie, okay. Goldie Road. So we're right across from Intrigue Wines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're right beside them. Yeah. So we started planting in 2013. So most of the vineyard was planted 2013, 14, and 15. And really the whole philosophy and our story is we are 100% estate, and we're currently 100% Lake Country. And we don't buy any fruit from anywhere else. So the wines we're producing are actually a really true expression of Lake Country terroir and our climate.
So cool. Up there. That's so cool, right? Yeah. Like, how many can say that?
Yeah, probably not many.
Yeah.
And that's also why our portfolio is very white and sort of aromatic and rosé focused, because we're really just growing and being true to our site and what we can do well there, and then just doing those varieties well and sort of diversifying within those varieties, and a lot of interesting new things that are coming out, especially in 2020, and new styles. So the site is very special with our west facing slope, the steep aspect of the land that drains, sort of slopes toward the lake, the proximity to the lake. So there's very good air drainage, very little, low frost risk, and sort of winter damage risk. Well, more frost than winter damage. They're actually two different things I've learned quite recently. They're not terms that should be used interchangeably. so good air drainage for frost to really flow out and not settle in any low spots in the vineyard. Our proximity to the lake is mitigates both the summer heat and the winter cold. So when the heat in the summer, when the heat rises up off the land, it draws cold air in from the lake and creates a current in from the lake. And sort of there's always steady airflow and a breeze through there. And then in winter, when the lake is warmer and the heat rises up off the lake, it draws the cold air down to the lake and creates the opposite current. But for the most part, there's always a steady breeze on that site, a lot of good air movement. So we have very low disease risk, low disease pressure for rot and things like that. Also, our site, where we're located in the northern Okanagan, so we've got, a slightly shorter growing season than down south. Our budding is a bit later, so that's why we don't have big reds, Syrahs and Cabs and things. Slightly shorter season, slightly lower average temperatures, but it's that diurnal shift day to night where we cool off really nicely at night. That helps lock in a lot of that acidity and that freshness. And what I've found, because I do have experience throughout the valley with fruit, especially a lot of southern fruit at one of my old jobs, what I'm finding from this site is a very special and wonderful balance that every winemaker could probably dream of. It's a very slow accumulation of sugar. Like the sugar accumulation doesn't speed past the flavor development in the fruit.
Wow.
So we've got that flavor development sort of all maturing around the same time that the sugars are slowly accumulating. Also, we're maintaining a beautiful low pH and higher natural acidity. So the wines are all very vibrant and fresh and lifted and very crisp. So it is really a very special, unique site. And we're very lucky to be working with the fruit from that. I'm very,
that's
I'm
awesome.
very lucky to have the fruit from that site.
Yeah.
So
have you worked at a site like that before? No.
No, not specifically and so intensely.
Yeah.
Right. And so intimately.
Do you want to just speak a little bit? I know this is a little bit off topic, but where have you worked? The vineyard.
So when I first finished university, I started at Kelowna Wines. So I was working with Howard Soon.
Nice.
On Sandhill, Kelowna Vineyards. And then Andrew Peller bought our company. So that I sort of assumed the Peller Estates BC portfolio. And then when we had partnered with the Wayne Gretzky family, and we launched Wayne Gretzky Okanagan, I was the winemaker for that when we first launched it back in 2014.
Okay.
So I was there for over 11 years. And so what was supposed to be a 1-year maternity job morphed into full-time. And then I never actually got to the traveling and the vintage hopping and going around the world after university.
We're supposed to be in New Zealand. You're supposed to be in, France. And
everywhere, exactly. Germany, Alsace, anywhere, right? So in 2010, I did a vintage in New Zealand, and that's where I met Adrian Baker, who was our pioneering winemaker here at Peak Cellars.
Yes.
And then
God bless him. Yeah.
Yes.
Very sorry to hear that news.
It was really sad to lose that part of our family.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd known him. Yeah.
You've worked with him for how many years?
Worked with him. So I did a vintage at Craigie Range with him, and then, nice. 2 years at the Peak.
Yeah.
So I had the benefit of learning all about how his philosophy and sort of how slowly, over time learned about the caves and the, how that was all drilled into the bedrock. I had gone up there a few times during construction. And over time, just learning about his philosophy, why and how he planted certain mixes of clones of Pinot together and certain blocks to make sort of field blends of Pinot Noir, and and some of the things that he's done in the wines he's created. We're carrying on, those styles and some of those.
Well, it's
wines.
a gift. It's a gift you have now. So
yes,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's excellent.
So I left Peller in 2015 to do more of the international work, which I found in my mid-30s a bit of a challenge with working visas and things. So I ended up partnering up. I got connected with Wither Hills and partnered up with them and ended up doing 4 years back and forth with them. So for 4 years, I went to Wither Hills for 6 months and then came back to the Okanagan for 6 months and picked up some different contracts and, helped commission and start up Fitzpatrick in 2016.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that's where, I got more of the sparkling, some more sparkling and learning and education under my belt and working a few months with Sarah. And then 2017 and 18, those 2 vintages, I was actually at the Peak with Adrian. Yeah.
Well, we actually met at Shannon's place the first time, and I tasted Gruner. You had brought Gruner, and that was very exciting. Yeah. So,
yeah. That's it's one of the 8 varieties, a unique variety that we've got up there at the Peak that not really a lot of other people in BC have.
Yeah, totally true.
Yeah. So that's a bit about me. So our wines, what we're growing at our 2 properties. So we've got our 4 acres and our sort of almost 100 acres. Primarily, so it's mostly Pinot Noir, then Chardonnay and Pinot Gris. Then we've got Riesling, Gewürztraminer, Gruner Veltliner, Gamay Noir, and a few Rosa Merlot. We've got those sort of 8 varieties up there. But the things we're doing with them, we're making 16 or 17 different wines out of those varieties. Just they're all so versatile, and you can diversify them so much in so many different styles. So we're really starting to have a lot of fun with that. And also now that a lot of the vineyard is reaching a level of maturity, a lot of them are at least 6, 7, 8 years old now. Naturally, they're actually presenting us with opportunities for creating some interesting wines because their soil profiles and unique characteristics in certain blocks of the vineyards are showing us sort of potential with different characteristics for fruit. So we're exploring and exploiting a lot of that a lot more, starting with 2020, which is reflected in a lot of the wines we're going to taste today.
That's exciting.
So it's quite exciting. It's really exciting and rewarding to be part of something that's so young and so new, but something that's really helping make a mark for Lake Country in BC and in our industry.
So you said caves. What's cave? They built caves? Did you drill into the?
Yeah, so we brought in mining equipment and spent a long time blasting and digging. And we had a plan for about the first 10 meters. And then we got in there and Dennis told the guys, he said, well, you guys are the experts and just drill where the land takes you. So there was really no set drawing that it had to go a certain way. It's kind of like just go and the land
go with the shape of the land.
Yeah.
The flow of the granite, I guess.
Yeah. So there's about 330 meters worth of caves, and it kind of winds and it loops, and there's different access points sort of all the way around, 360 degrees around. There's about 5 different access points. So you go in one way and you'll come out facing a completely different direction in the valley. You can fit stacks of barrels 3 high in there, so it's that tall. To stabilize it, to be able to get occupancy, there's 8 to 11 foot rods that are stability rods that are drilled back into the rock to sort of hold everything in place. Then it was sort of netted and shotcreted, and it's fully lit. It's epoxy floor, like paved, sort of poured floor, drainage. There's piping in there for wine transfers, for gas supply, for CO2 and nitrogen, and it's and it's wide enough to drive vehicles through. That's been tested a few times, so that they're pretty impressive. And all year long, the cool thing is all year long, those caves are consistently between 8 and 12 degrees.
Isn't that the most amazing thing, though? Isn't that amazing? Like, yeah, like now we know why there were caves and why they used caves. It's the perfect place to let bottles lay down and rest, or to wine to mature, or whatever. Like,
so the whole Chardonnay and Pinot Noir program ages in there during its sort of resting, aging time. It's also a beautiful spot and temperature for bottle fermentation for traditional method sparkling, which is what we've gotten into as well.
Wow.
So it's just a really, really nice, fine, delicate mousse, a very fine bubble, because the temperature is
It's
nice
so,
and cool. It just allows that fermentation to happen slowly. And
that's
yeah, just this
amazing.
beautiful development. Yeah.
So does the cave have a name?
No, they're just the caves. So the caves is the cave site was the original site for building a winery. There wasn't originally a plan to build two, but the caves, you know, the vineyards were planted, and then we got into caves, and sort of it was, you know, realized there's vines going to be maturing and fruit ready to process into wine long before the caves will even be finished and that winery is ready. So we need to build a winery. So that was sort of, we had the site, the old Rainbow Ranch Garden Market on Goldie Road. We had that site that was already planted. So we put a winery there, which is now Peak Cellars. So we've got and just to keep a bit true to the land and the history of the land, we've got a half-acre garden there that supplies our bistro about 75 to 80% of the year with produce, whether it's fresh during the season or it's canned or preserved or pickled or, you know, just in storage, like your root vegetables and things that you can store through winter. So we, you know, and even in February during the polar vortex, we've got 2 greenhouses on site as well. We were harvesting fresh like mustard and microgreens and things like that out of the greenhouse in February.
That's amazing.
So it is really quite amazing. We try to do as much farm to table. We've got berries planted. Part of the bigger vineyard down along Carr's Landing Road is an old orchard site. So we've got all kinds of different fruit trees planted there as well. So awesome. Yeah, it's really diverse and really dynamic.
It sounds like biodiversity, you know, when you've got gardens and trees that are, you know, it's not a monoculture of just vine. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So disease, so there's a kind of the disease threshold's kind of low from what you said. Yep. So I'm wondering, so are you subscribing to organics or anything like that?
We are composting. We're taking all of our seeds and our must and our pomace and stuff, and we have started a composting program that does take a couple of years to get that all composting and going. You know, we're not fully organic and biodynamic. We do sort of spray some of the necessary sprays. There's, you know, a few sprays a year before berry touch and bunch closure and things like that you want to get in there. But we do try to keep as much sustainability and organic like farming in mind as we can. We do that as much as we can without going full certification.
Yeah. Is there a goal to become, you know, fully certified, or are you just going to play it by ear and see how it?
I think for now, play it by ear, but keep that sort of always sort of in, you know, in the vault of keeping that in mind as we're doing our farming practices.
Yeah.
To sort of be as organic, you know, follow a lot of those practices as we can.
Do you have to irrigate with the heat that you know is in the Okanagan, or because of your proximity, you have maybe other options? You know?
We are irrigating the site at Peak Cellars. It's quite heavy clay, so it holds a lot of its own moisture. So we typically don't have to irrigate that unless we've got baby plants or some interplanting and we need to establish. But we typically don't irrigate that. Although we've also never had, in my entire life living in the Okanagan, I don't think we've ever had a summer this hot before.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, even this June, like this week of June, it's insane. It's just so there's probably a little bit of irrigating happening at that site. And we do irrigate as needed. We have a unit, it's a perometer. It basically tests water pressure of a leaf. And depending on the reading, it will tell you if the vine is in stress or not and if it needs water. So we don't just on schedule water and add water unnecessarily.
Right.
So the plant, we do the testing on the plant and let the plant in that block tell us if it's thirsty, if it's in stress and it needs water or not.
I love that
just so
technology.
we're not watering willy-nilly. Yeah.
I love that technology is helping us, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
Not
this season, it started off dry and warm, didn't it? In April,
Yes.
there was not a lot of rain. This vintage is looking like the warmest maybe start anyway.
Yeah. When it does get too hot, just like humans, and heat stroke, and you don't function with too much heat, the same
Yeah.
thing happens to vines basically.
Yeah.
At a certain temperature, they will actually shut down just to preserve themselves. There won't be any photosynthesis. The stomates close and try to keep as much water in the plant as possible. So they actually will shut down. So that depending on how long it's shut down, that actually can delay things as well. It doesn't necessarily speed it up.
Yeah.
So where we were maybe about a week or two ahead of last year, or sort of just a week ahead of normal, possibly this heat has maybe just slowed it down and got us into a normal year.
Do you get nervous that the vines will die in the heat, or they just don't die, they just shut down? Like, is there damage that can happen?
I'm not sure if they've really, there's as much, they die from the heat. I think it's more just a shutdown and a pause. Yeah. But it also depends on how long that goes for, right?
Yeah.
So hopefully this spike is, hopefully we're starting to cool down.
Are you seeing it break? A break coming up?
I think by Thursday it's supposed to start dropping down again a little bit and cooling off. So maybe it's only like mid-30s instead of 44 in Kelowna today.
It's hot, hot, hot.
44 in Kelowna today. Feels like 46. So on the island, you know, we're a few degrees warmer on the thermostat, but it's the humidity makes it feel almost the same anyway. So it's not like, So our vacay to the island is hot as well. We haven't really escaped the heat of the Okanagan. So
no. I live by the ocean. I live in White Rock, and I have to tell you that, you know, the air conditioning is great, and then it gets a little stuffy because it's so warm, and you're just like, I just need to open the window to let the air breathe, but there's no breeze. It's like a sauna is just blowing air. So
a wall of muggy heat. Yeah,
wall of muggy heat. There you go. Yeah. So, do you want to talk? So you talked about the vineyards. You talked about the 2 locations. We talked about 100 acres and 4 acres. We talked about caves. We talked about a little bit about the soil type in both of the distinct locations. You know, we talked about where the plantings are, so that's cool. Do we want to talk a little bit about, so I had an idea. We'll talk in sort of generalities. We'll do the introduction. We'll talk about, what we've done so far, about the vineyard and the winery, but maybe we want to talk a little bit about winemaking. Then we'll pause. We'll shut this video recording down. Then we'll start up a new one and we'll do the tasting so that people don't have to watch through the whole thing to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Just a few more comments and thoughts about our property and just the project that we're still working on. Back to the cave site, which was the original site for the winery. So we finished the caves and then started building everything else around it, because the caves obviously are the deepest, lowest part of the whole project. So then we started building the production cellar and the tasting rooms and the admin offices, and we've got an amphitheater that was hollowed out. This massive earth that was basically hollowed out. We've got a second stage area that's sort of poured concrete out over top of the owner's house, some on-site quarters for musical guests and people when they come. Massive restaurant, different tasting rooms. And so Dennis, being as resourceful as he is, we've excavated and dug out all this rock from the caves, and we've dug out this massive hole of earth for the amphitheater. Well, we've basically, and part of the property, we've got 100 acres planted, but almost 200 acres then is still open land. And part of that is a big rock quarry, and where we've put all of our earth materials. And so he bought 2 concrete plants and installed them on a different section of one of our properties. So we're actually using all of our own materials from what we've excavated out to mix and produce our own concrete to build our building.
Cool.
So it's really like, just not just farm to table, but like earth to building. Like we're just repurposing the materials on site to construct our building. So
Amazing.
that's still probably a good year away before anything really opens up to public. But it's a pretty incredible project. There's not really anything quite like that caliber happening here in the Okanagan.
That ingenuity.
Yeah.
That ingenuity and then there was, like you said, resourcefulness, the know-how, the people to contact to get things done. Sounds amazing.
Yeah. So it's really, everyone's just really excited for it to finally finish and like see the finished product. But
can guests visit? Can people visit the winery, or is it not open to visitors?
No,
yet?
not yet. No.
And that is a year away is kind of what you were alluding to. Do you think?
Probably at least. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A year could be ambitious, but you just never know how quickly things might accelerate or not. But I would say it's a good year away.
Okay.
Yeah. But it could also be longer. So don't anyone.
Yeah, no. Listen, they always say, in these kinds of projects, it takes twice as long and costs twice as much. I don't know if anybody can validate that, but it's giant. It's a giant project. So
yeah. So, winemaking.
Yeah, your forte.
My forte. Yeah. I mean, I could talk science and winemaking all night long. I make science fun. I was a scientist, didn't know what to do with it. I discovered wine and now I'm using my science to make wine. So I can, there are fun ways to be a scientist.
And all girls should consider science. That's what I think.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. And even, winemaking was never anything that was never one of those careers that they market to you as a woman in math and science, or even as a student in math and science, because I mean, who's going to go promoting alcohol production to high school students, right? So, it's almost one of those things you don't stumble on until a few years out.
Yeah.
Which is how it happened with me. So, but as soon as I kind of made the connection of science, there's science involved with fermenting stuff, to make wine and other things. I never turned back. That's how I knew I was going to apply science, and I just went with it. So, winemaking. Well, just a little bit more from a personal note. Sort of my winemaking inspiration comes from, obviously most winemakers who would love to just make wines in the styles that they love to drink. But also knowing that there's a very diverse palette sort of spectrum out there and the different styles that people like. So my inspiration comes from, I love Rieslings. I think Riesling is one of the most versatile varieties around. There's so many different, the acid just gives it so many opportunities of different ways to express it. Sparkling, ice wine, off dry wine, like everything in between. A very good backbone as a structural, as a blender, like blending wine or grape as well. And I also have a very long love affair with Alsatian Gewürztraminer, and that sort of opened up my eyes to more Alsatian style wines and even Pinot Gris, and realizing that, Pinot Gris and Gewürztraminers, there's so much richness and structure and texture that can evolve. And as those ones with some age can really develop some really interesting character. And really what we're focusing on with our site is, because we are all estate and we grow all the fruit, we really can dial in yields, like, pounds per plant or tons per acre, however you're doing that measure, how much water goes in, size of the berries, cluster size, we can really drive excellent concentration. So our wines, you'll find, are there's a purity, there's an intensity to them, and along with that balance that we talked about with sugar and flavor and the retention of acid, as the grapes are reaching a level of maturity for harvest, all of that really is encompassed in these wines. And there's so much flavor and intensity that the wines are beautiful wines in their almost in their in a pure form. And most of our wines are dry. They're fermented dry, and they're just left in that pure form. Or stylistically, we do have a few that we do have a little bit of residual sugar in, but it's natural residual sugar. So we do an arrested fermentation on a batch of Riesling or on a batch of Gewurz, usually the last batch of those varieties that's brought in, so that we know what our total volume is, and trying to target like a final residual sugar, knowing what the acid's going to be, and you sort of calculate where to stop one batch so that when you blend them, you almost hit that target. And I think that's really special to keep that natural sugar as well, because it's not just the natural sugar, but there is a little bit of essence of that natural grape juice and that grape flavor that adds to the complexity of the wine as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's really been such a treat working with the fruit from that site and just seeing how the vines are maturing and the flavors and things we're getting from it.
Do we talk about oak, or do we talk about neutral oak, or stainless, or?
We have, there is our Chardonnays. The Chardonnay the oak Chardonnay has always been 100% French.
Okay.
But a very fine balance of how much new, usually 15 to 20% new, and then the rest varying years of older and neutral. Pinot Noir has always been 100% French oak, same thing, just really balancing. You don't want the oak to be the dominating character of the wines.
Right.
But beyond that, we actually do incorporate sort of 1-2 year old and neutral oak into quite a few of the other wines as well. The new Gewürztraminer we're going to taste, even the regular classic Gewürztraminer, the Gruner Veltliner, and some Pinot Gris. Actually, they have components of barrel fermentation as well, whether it's just neutral oak for that textural roundness and that structural development, rather than a lot of oak impact in those flavors and characters. So it's not a huge program with our aromatics, because the change you'll see with the Peak portfolio moving forward is 2019s for oak Chardonnay and Pinot Noir were the last of those you'll see from Peak Cellars. Because in 2020 we started making the wines, the Chardonnay and Pinot up at the new winery. So moving forward, the oak Chardonnay and Pinot Noir will be made under our new winery brand. We'll keep the unoaked Chardonnay with the Peak and sort of still have a red offering moving forward with the Peak. On Canada Day, we're actually releasing our first red blend. It'll be called Goldie Red, and it's a Gamay Noir Pinot Noir blend. Now that our Gamay Noir is just starting to mature off that site.
Wow, Chevrolet. So, I love that.
Yeah. So those are some of the sort of portfolio style changes that are coming, but all the rest of the wines that you've seen from the Peak and the new stuff coming out this year, that will stay with the Peak. And then Chardonnay and Pinot Noirs, but whether it's different blocks, different clones, different multiple tiers. So Nikki Calloway is going to be really, diving with her expertise in those wines, really developing a beautiful portfolio at the new winery with those. And also a traditional method, sort of champagne style Chardonnay, Pinot Noir based sparkling wine. And we've got sparkling Riesling for the Peak. So,
well, I think
a lot of excitement, a lot of things going on.
I mean, from what you've said, now I want, the doors to open so I can go and wander around. But very excited, and I'm really excited to taste now. So was there anything else that we need to add to our kind of info session that we maybe didn't touch on?
I don't think so. Maybe just, when if people come to the winery to visit, we're really trying to market and give people unique experiences and things, right? So there's all kinds of different tasting experiences you can have, whether it's with a charcuterie board, wine and cheese paired, select your own flight, do our featured flight. There's a Goldie Block tour, so sort of a vineyard garden tour with our sort of field blended wine. Over the winter, we had done a Chardonnay vertical, so 2016 through 2019 Chardonnay plus the unoaked. But for the summer now, we're launching our Riesling tasting, our Riesling experience. So all sort of different styles and vintages of Rieslings.
And where's that happening?
And this is at Peak Cellars at our Peak Cellars property. So
Okay.
it really is, and with the bistro and the view, like it really is, you sit down and have your tasting. You're not just quickly
Perfect.
standing at the bar and having
Yeah.
your tasting. It is a real experience. And, we've got some great wine educators on staff that, can really give you that experience, and you sort of just sit and relax. It's not really rushed.
I think perhaps we can thank, not thank COVID, but COVID's really created some changes that I think showed signs, showed us that you don't have to, standing room only tastings, that in fact, the better result actually is the more intimate, sit down, have a host, taste through the wines, learn some information.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's so valuable. So I study and all that, but not everyone does. But for them to have this aha moment, maybe never having sat down with anyone to sort of be shepherded through wines and winemaking and the whole wine story. Like, I think there'll be a lot of wine converts, and people who come to wine and don't leave right away, So I think that's wonderful, and I can imagine that will really make a difference for Peak Cellars, and for you guys going forward, not only from kind of like the granular part of how do we do it best, but also from the sticky part of people have come and now they want to come and see the new, when the new place opens and
Right. What's the excitement? When's it opening?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And
So
I think what we're offering people too is how we're exploring these different styles of wines we're making. We've now got 4 different expressions of Riesling. There's 2 styles of Gewürztraminer. By the end of summer, we're going to have our 3rd release of a Pinot Gris. So people can really see, just to come and experience the versatility of these varieties and really see there's not just one way to make these certain wines. So it's really a unique opportunity to show people, what is out there, the world of wine.
And to showcase your many talents.
Yeah.
Which I love.
I'm sure that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, on that note, there's so much more to discuss. So I'm going to stop this screen, and we'll stop the recording. And thank you so much. Looking forward to visiting.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Barb.